Welcome back to Fishing with Vance, the fishing channel not trying to sell you anything. On today's video, I'm going to be going over my strategies for how I pair my rod, my reel, to whatever lure I'm going to be throwing for that day. Based on the conditions, time of year, all those types of things. Obviously, fish hit different things at different times of the year. I'm talking about bass. So let's go over it. I'll tell you what my mindset is when I'm about to head to the lake and try to figure out how to catch these fish. Thanks for joining me. Let's get into it. All right, so I got out some of my rod and reel and lure combinations just to go over my approach and my strategy depending on where I'm going to be fishing, what I'm fishing for in some cases, and what I think the conditions are, and also what I think is going to work depending on everything from the wind to cloud cover, time of year, so on and so on, water temperature, all that good stuff. I won't go over all of it. I'm just going to go over some of my most basic ones that have given me success over the years, and hopefully it helps you out. All right, but before I even get started, you don't have to have all these rods and reels. Over the years, I've accumulated these things. I got a bunch more over there on the wall. I don't know if you can see them. It's just over time. You add. Fishing is my hobby, so you just keep adding to it, and but it's not necessary. That's the point I'm trying to make. And also, before I get started, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm not selling you anything. I tend to use the same type of rods and reels, the ones that work for me, but this is not in any way, shape, or form an endorsement of any of this equipment. It's just what I use, and I thought I'd share it with you. But before I get into it, I just wanted to show you, this is my original rod here. I bought this at Kmart. It's all worn off. This is, there it is. You probably can't see that. This is the Kmart Sport Fisher, and it is paired up with a 2000 series Shimano reel, spinning reel. And as you can see, it's seen better day. I actually zip tied the line, the rod guide on there. It's a 2-piece rod. I think it's a medium action. And this thing has caught probably more fish than all these other ones combined. And this was my only rod and reel for probably the first 20 years of fishing. And I used to use this when I fished with my pops. There's his hat up there, Pops. And we fished. This is the only rod I had. And so you don't have to have, I guess the point I'm making is, you don't have to have all these. If you are on a budget and you want to just stick with 1 or 2 rods, I would recommend something like this. Not something this old, they don't make this anymore, but a medium action rod with the 2000 series. I threw everything on this, from plastic worms to spinnerbaits, crankbaits, you name it. And so this is my original, and those 2 striper up there, you probably can't see those up here. This guy and that guy, they were all caught on this rod. So put this guy down, but if you don't have to have all these rods and reels. But again, it's my hobby, so it's what I like to do. So I have all this stuff. But having said that, let's talk about my strategy. So I'll start here first. This is a Shimano HMX. This is my setup for trout and smallmouth sometimes. I'll throw this in the river for smallmouth. I love catching smallmouth in the river on an ultralight like this, because it just it makes the fight so great. The smallies coming in against the current. I have several videos of me catching smallmouth with this setup. This is a 5'6" rod, and I pair it with a Fluger size 20 reel. And this thing, it's great for trout. It's great for smallmouth. I happen to have just a minnow bait on here with a light hook. As far as line goes, this is either 4 or 6 pound line. Again, this is definitely for trout and smallmouth in the river. This is what I use if I'm heading there. I like the longer 5'6" ultralight. I have some others over there that are 5 foot, and the only reason I don't like those is because because I can't throw the lure as far. So when I'm at the river, I want something I can get all the way to the other side of the Shenango River. So anyway, this is balanced perfectly. I don't throw really anything heavy on this. Every once in a while I'll throw a smaller KVD Fat Baby Finesse on this, or the split tail jig. But this is my trout setup, and if I'm headed for trout or smallies, this is what I take. I usually take one backup ultralight, just in case I don't, where I fish with this is not very close to my house. So if I'm driving an hour or so to get to the spot, you don't want to get there and have a day-ending snafu and be done fishing. So, but this is my go-to for trout and smallmouth. So let me set that over there. Again, I would recommend getting a little bit longer ultralight. All right. Next up, if I'm going to be, I throw a lot of soft plastics. Where I fish is pretty weedy, and if you follow the channel, we fish at either a place called Bragg or the Swamp. Those two places have a lot of weeds in them, so I tend to not throw a whole lot of crankbaits. I tend to throw more finesse baits. And both of these are Fenwick Eagle rods. I believe they are only 6 foot. Yeah, they're 6 foot, and these are both medium light. And I use these for a finesse setup. And let me also, before I get any further, I don't throw a bait caster. I just never have. It's just not something that I have ever thrown or want to. Actually, I may someday in my life, but I like a spinning reel, and I'm pretty accurate with these. I can put any of these things on a dime. Just over time, you get used to them, and you can throw them right where you want them. And target casting for me is important. If I'm throwing in a pocket or up to the bank or wherever, or around a laydown, is important that I'm accurate. So I tend to be pretty accurate with these spinning reels. But also I tend to get fluger reels. You'll notice as I go through, almost every one of these is a fluger reel. The reason is because, again, not paid by Fluger, they just don't break. They work, and they are bulletproof. I've told a story many times before. I was at Bass Pro in Memphis once on a business trip, and the guy in there, he told me, "Hey, you got all these reels. The one that comes back the least for problems is the Fluger President and Fluger overall." So that's why I started buying them, and he was right. They never break. All the ones I have, none of them have broken. All right, so this one, back to the balance. This setup is I use this particular one for this. This is simple setup. It's just on a light 16. I think it's a 16th ounce jig head on a Zoom Fat Albert double tail grub. This lure catches a ton of bass for me, and it's when I'm throwing this, because it's so light. I got it all tangled, but because it's so light, I like to throw it on this Finesse setup, which is a medium light 6 foot rod. This is a single piece, and I believe these both have moderate fast in terms of their action. So this setup works great. I throw on this light setup. This is only 6-pound line, and I could use this lure, or also sometimes I can put a fluke on there right on that jig head, and I can cast this plenty far enough. The reel is a size 30, so it's their 6930, so a 3000 series, I guess. So, but anyway, it's a 6930, and it has plenty of punch whenever I'm catching the bass. Now, I tend to throw this in the lake that tends to have smaller fish in it. If I'm going to the bigger lake, I'll get to that for the other setups. All right, but the other setup, same thing, Fenwick Eagle. This one is one that I tend to throw a lot of. My setups are Mojo or split shot rig. Follow the channel, I fish that probably 75% of the time. It's just something I'm comfortable with. It works, and I guess that's why I use it a lot. But what I happen to have on here is, again, just a light fluke. This is just a Zoom the fluke. It's the same thing, 6-pound line. And this is paired with a Fluger Patriarch. It's super light. If I'm going to be fishing all day or a long period of time, and it's going to be a finesse situation, I will throw this. And this rod and reel setup comes with me to the lake pretty much every time, because I'll throw this fluke on it. I'll throw the Fat Baby Finesse worm on this. I'll even throw the 6.5 inch Fat Baby, or the Finesse worm on this from KVD, the Perfect Plastics, those guys over there. But this setup, again, this is, if you were just going to have one, if I was going to just pick one of all of these, this would be the one I would take, just because it's light. You could throw it all day. You can't really throw, crankbaits on this, but if I'm going to finesse fish, this is what I'm going to take. And it has caught me ton of fish. So if I'm going where there's going to tend to be the smaller fish, I'm going to throw this 80% of the time. Just change this out, and the fluke, the Fat Baby Finesse, maybe even the double toe grub, I might even throw that. So this gets thrown all year long. You can even put a spinner on here, a lighter spinner, inline spinner. I've thrown that on here. But again, for the finesse setup, it's tough to beat these. I've had them for years. They work really well for a finesse setup in where the weeds are not super heavy. All right, moving on to these guys. Now, these, if I'm going to be throwing a Senko, and I tend to peg my Senkos. I fish them wacky, probably 80% of the time. So I guess it's called a Neko rig. But I just peg it with a nail. And if I'm going to be throwing this around, I like to throw it on a little, to get good distance. Because I have that nail weight in there, I use these Veritas from Abu Garcia. Now this is a little bigger reel. I pair this up with a size 35. This is I think the 6935. Now this is also the bigger version of the Patriarch from Fluger. The reason I use this is I can throw this a long way. If I'm going to be fishing this back to the boat, maybe a little less weedy conditions, and I'm going to throw that Senko that's pegged, I can throw it a long way. This rod is a medium light 6.9, and so the action, I believe, is fast on these. I'm not sure. Thought on that one. I believe the action on these Yeah, fast. So I could cast that a long way. It has plenty of backbone to when you're fishing wacky. This has plenty of backbone to set the hook and get the fish in. So this pairing of the Fluger, the size 35, the Veritas, and the Senko, again, it's perfect. It's perfectly balanced to throw that Senko. And you could throw this Senko, say, weightless. They're heavier than the other worms, the finesse worms. So I like having the longer rod with the bigger reel for that setup. So I very rarely will go to the lake without some type of wacky setup. Now these other two, this is, and if you're wondering what the blue tape is, it just means that I put fresh line on it for the year, because I reline everything in the off season. So now this guy is also a medium light. That was a medium light fast. This has just good old fashioned Fluger President, also size 35. So again, the 6 foot, I have the size 30s. So I wouldn't want to put this 35 on this 6 foot rod. So these, the bigger ones, I'm getting a little tangled here. The 6'9" or the 7 foot, these are both 6'9". The size 35 matches better with these. And that's what the video is really all about. It's about matching the size of reel with the rod. Again, I don't think, for me, I wouldn't put a size 30 on here. I would put the 35 on this 6'9" or 7 foot rods. Now this particular lure, this has, when I fish, I've been fishing this a lot in the heavier, in the swamp, which is pretty much all, probably about 80% weeds. I don't take these lighter, medium light, smaller rod reel combos to the swamp, because I need a lot more punch to get them out of those heavy weed beds that are at the swamp where I fish in a real heavy condition. So this woolly bug has kind of taken over my whole tackle box. This setup has just, again, I have it rigged mojo, so I can slide those split shots down. I don't know if you can see that, but that is how I tend to fish it, and it just kills in the weeds, because I can get that to flutter down on the outskirts, on the outside edge of the weeds. But I need the extra punch to get them in. Once I hook them, I need a little more power here. So that's why I go with this, the medium light with the fast. But it's, again, the 35 with the 6'9", and to throw that woolly bug around. So that's the type of lure. The other thing I'll throw on this is, say, the bigger worm, the bigger KVD, the bigger 6.5. I'll throw that on here as well at the lake that tends to hold bigger fish, and I need the power to pull them out once they bury in the weeds. Last but not least is this is more a traditional Texas rig with a bullet weight and a stop. Because it's, again, I would throw this in the weedy conditions. If I'm going to the swamp and I need to punch down through the weeds, I'll put on the bullet weight. I'll take this with me. This is a heavier, this is even heavier. This is just a medium, 6.6 medium, not medium light. And this has even more backbone to it. And so when I let the fish have it with this, if I'm going really deep into the weeds, then I will take this with me and throw this, or a ribbon worm is another one that I like to throw with this. if I'm going to be punching down on the weeds, just like everybody, I got the bullet weight and I got a beefier rod. Same thing, size 35. This is another Fluger President. I have that paired up with, this is a heavier, beefier Veritas, the medium. And it gives me plenty of power to pull them up out of there, because I'm really going down to ming them in the weeds. So I'm heading to the swamp. I'm going to take the big Veritas boys here to get them up out of there. All right, so I tend to throw a lot of soft plastics, as you see. But in the spring, I will be throwing this like most guys. In the spring, starting in March and April, I'll be throwing a lot of spinner baits. And what I have this on is on a Fenwick HMG. This guy's real beefy. It's a medium with fast action. Now for the spinner bait, this is on another size 35 Fluger President, and I have braid on here, so there's no stretch whenever the fish hits this spinner bait. And this setup has worked great for that spinner bait. I've thrown that, a chatterbait, things like that on this setup. This is heavier, and so you can throw a much heavier lure. So if I got wind, cloud cover, stained water, I'm going to be throwing a spinner bait, and I'm going with a bigger, heavier rod and reel setup. This thing I think is 7 feet, no, 6'6", and so this is what I'm going to throw in that circumstance. This doesn't always come to the lake with me. It just depends if I think the conditions match using it. Now, if I'm going to throw crankbaits, I have a couple of these. And since I don't use, I should say, a bait caster. I have this Fluger Arbor, which I take such good care of this thing because Fluger doesn't make it anymore. And the reason I love it so much is because it's perfect for me for a crankbait. Because as you can see, and take my light out, the spool, see how the spool is wider, it's bigger around, and that allows me to cast this thing a country mile with a crankbait on here. Now I'll throw on this. This is again a little heavier. This is a medium. Same thing, 6'9", and when I'm throwing this, I got the shad wrap on here now. This tends to be one of my go-to crankbaits. But I also throw a square bill on here, a lipless on here, any crankbait, anything that I'm going to throw over and over and over again. I tend to throw that shad wrap because it just catches everything. So that's what's on here. This needs to reline for the year. But for me, for throwing a crankbait, you don't have to have the arbor. But that's just the one that I'll reach for since I have it if I'm going to throw crankbaits. And then I tend to just take one or two and just keep swapping them out with this swivel. So if I'm going to throw crankbaits, then again in the spring and fall, I'll throw these. There is one lake I fish that doesn't have any weeds at all, so I always bring this with me and throw it. And really more as a search bait. I tend to not be a crankbait fisherman, but there's times for it, and times that it's very effective. I have way more confidence with soft plastics and finesse fishing. So anyway, so there you have it. So there is my crankbait setup. A lot of times this doesn't come. I won't even bring this if I'm going to the swamp or a real heavy weeded area because there's no point in it. You can't pull this through all the weeds. The one place I fish, it's just, like I said, it's like 80% weeds, so there's no point in even bringing this with me. So So there you have it. There's my approach whenever I'm heading to the lake. 9 times out of 10, I'm taking a Fenwick Eagle I'm taking this guy. He is always going because it's so light with the Patriarch on there, and I can fish so many different soft plastics with this. And I've taken this to the swamp and gotten them out of there with this as well. It's a little bit more of a challenge. The only thing I'll use this for is if I'm heading to the river in the ultralight. If I'm planning to throw tubes at the river for smallies, that ultralight's not strong enough for tubes, so I'll take this and throw tubes at the river. So anyway, so there you have it. There's my approach, rod, reel, and lure setup. I think it is important for them to sort of match. You're not going to want to throw. I wouldn't throw this big crankbait on that 6-foot Fenwick Eagle, and just like I wouldn't throw the spinnerbait on there either. So if you have too heavy of a lure, you're not going to want to put it on that light finesse setup, and vice versa. It'd be difficult to throw this fluke. It'd be difficult to get this fluke mojo with almost no weight or weightless on some of these heavier rods. You can do it, but you're not going to be able to be as accurate as with this. And sometimes accuracy in your cast is everything. If you're trying to get it right up next to a log, or right up in a pocket of weeds, or right as close to the bank as you can without putting it in the tree, it's important that you match your rod, your reel, and the weight of your lure. Otherwise you're going to be throwing it up in the tree, which I do that too sometimes. But anyway, so that's my setup. That's my approach when I'm going to the lake. Can't wait to go. It's so cold here now, so I'm in the garage, but it'll be time to fish soon. I hope you learned something. If you did, if you liked this video, hit like, hit sub, all those good things. I appreciate you watching. Can't wait to get back on the water. But stay tuned. I'll be doing some mods for the Pelican Bass Raider over there. That'll be coming up here this week, and we'll see what happens. So thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one on Fishing with Vance.